look, whilst I've been sick, there's been even more announcements of films that didn't need to be made. Look, I enjoy Disney as much as the next person, right? And I always try to keep an open mind about the Disney remakes. Hell, for the most part, people seem to really hate those films, but I do think that some of them are genuinely good, and the hate can be a bit overblown. But in the last couple of years, these films have just been getting worse and worse, and now Disney seems content to churn out genuine trash, like legitimate trash tier content. I mean, Pinocchio last year, woof, that was rough. And then this year we're gonna have the likes of The Little Mermaid, which does not look good, and Peter Pan and Wendy, which I reckon is a contender for worst film of the year if the trailer's anything to go by. Looks like it's going to be a supreme cringe fest with lots of terrible acting and terrible effects to boot. And so yeah, to me, it's very clear that the same sort of dedication to quality is not being put into these remakes anymore. At least, I hope that's the case. Because if this is them actually trying to make good films, that's a bit sad, because they just keep failing. But honestly, I think they just make these things to fill out the Disney Plus roster. Regardless, as I said, we've got even more of these things in the pipeline. We have Lilo and Stitch, and of course, we recently had that announcement that, for some reason, they're making a Moana live action. Are you kidding me with that? But we'll get to that. Okay, anyway, we'll start off complaining with Lilo and Stitch, because this is actually the first time an announcement of these films has gotten me genuinely salty. For some of the Renaissance films they remade, and the Golden Era ones they've remade, I wasn't even born yet, or I was a baby, and I didn't watch them till I was older, and thus, they don't really hold that same pride of place in my nostalgic heart as some of the later films of the very late 90s and early 2000s. But Lilo and Stitch? Whew! That thing was my childhood. I saw it in cinemas, I got the Happy Meal toy, some Stitch head that would open its jaws and you press down on its teeth and it would bite you. Oh, good times. Or my Bubbles figurine. Oh, I loved my Bubbles figurine. It was plastic with like this rubbery sheen on his shoes and stuff. And he came complete with a detachable briefcase. Oh man, I miss the days of good Happy Meal toys. Oh, how the older generations have ruined Happy Meals forever. Stupid, overzealous parents. The glory days of the 2000s are now just a sad, lonely memory. But I digress. As I said, Lilo and Stitch. That's my generation. I loved it. A classic. And so suddenly, I get why people were angry about the previous ones. That primal rage and anger, it does take hold when the studio decides to remake this film. And I couldn't help but get a little bit defensive about it. After all, this is my childhood. They want to stomp all over it to make a quick buck. But even then, I think I would be able to, on some level, accept it if this was like 5 years ago. But nowadays, I have way more issues, because the films are just getting crap. For starters, the writing. I really don't think the recent scripts for these films are ever up to snuff. They do one of two things. Either they change almost nothing and they just look bland and derivative by comparison, or they change things or add things that were unnecessary. And in the end, they just end up looking like crap as a result. Like for instance, who the hell thought that adding that random dancer puppeteer side character into Pinocchio was a stroke of genius? It wasn't. It was terrible. On top of that, the dialogue is usually bad, verging on unwatchable at times, and the stories feel like cheap nostalgia grabs devoid of any life or nuance. The best remakes, or the best adaptations, are the ones like Maleficent or Cruella, that try to do something new and fresh with the characters instead of rehashing the old story that people were perfectly fine with. Because they do take these classic stories, and they ruin them. After all, I doubt they're going to do a remake of a film that nobody liked to begin with. On top of that, a film like Lilo and Stitch is going to rely heavily on child acting, which means they need a good script and good directing to cover that up. As after all, Lilo is mostly going to interact with characters who are not there, which makes the acting harder. The child acting previously in a lot of Disney films, it's been spotty at best. And judging by Peter Pan and Wendy, it has not gotten better. So in that respect, I am very nervous. And then you gotta combine that with the fact that this thing needs good effects. We're dealing with aliens here. Otherwise it's gonna look like a complete bargain bin joke. And you can see now why I'm doubly apprehensive that this is gonna be terrible, absolute dog shit. As after all, the visual effects of the remakes have been very bad as of recent. The recent trailers, The Little Mermaid especially, they really sealed the deal in that regard. Looks terrible. Those underwater segments, ugh. So either Disney's overworking its visual effects team or they're just not paying them enough. And either way, it bodes ill. So regardless of the potential benefits this film's gonna bring, I mean, surely it is a good thing in some regards, representation and all that. But I just can't help but feel like it's a childhood classic that's about to get torn apart by bad writing and bad effects and is going to go down in flames. And so yeah, I'm just a bit depressed by this fact. The fact that this movie is going to be made at all, and is almost certainly going to be terrible. Actually, the more I keep thinking about it, the more certain I become that this film is going to be a disaster. Oh, I've lost faith in everything. And so, yeah, from crushing despair to resigned acceptance. Apparently, The Rock has been very busy trying to get another vehicle for himself to get onto the big screen. As we're also seeing that Moana, of all films, is scheduled for its own live-action adaptation. Lovely. A film that is not even a decade old is being remade. Which, yeah, that's certainly a film that they're going to be making. I just don't get this. Moana's probably one of Disney Animation's last great films. Since then, the films have been good to poor. Nothing hitting that S tier like they had previously in the decade. So already, I think you're setting yourself up to fail with the comparisons. And the comparisons are coming way too soon. And whilst it is clear that they probably want to capitalize on the popularity of the franchise and on The Rock's box office potential, even if those numbers are slipping, and he has been in some bombs lately, I just feel like it's way too soon. There's going to be minimal comparative interest from a public perception. Because this is a film that's being made not even a decade removed from the release of the original. There's no way to separate them now. They're in the same generation. It's ridiculous. And on top of that, this is a film that really needs top tier visuals to succeed. Okay, so you have the Pacific Islands, very beautiful places, very photogenic. That's true. And so, okay, you're there, but you also need CGI water for a lot of the scenes. Big waves, water spirits, there's the big fire spirit, the big sparkly crab, Maui's bird form, his cinematic tattoos which he changes at will that show his history, the giant gods and goddesses. You need a really hefty budget to pull this off and make it look good. Because if those effects look like crap, it will tank the film. It's as simple as that. No amount of good acting or music or whatever is going to be able to salvage a film where everything looks like shit. Honestly, maybe this is just everybody riding the metaphorical wave, but all these water films coming out right after Avatar 2, it bodes very ill. None of them can compete visually with that. So maybe it's best to get some distance. Try again in, another 10 years. Because realistically, seeing the underwater segments in stuff like the Little Mermaid trailer, oh, that made me sad. And this has the same risk factor as that. And I really can just see this being a complete and utter disaster. I just don't see people clamoring for this film in particular to be remade. With Lilo and Stitch, at least you have that curiosity factor. There's been distance. It's a new generation. 20 years. Time's passed. Like I said, 20 years. 20 years since it's released. Damn it. How has it been 20 years? I feel so old. Anyway, yeah. There just hasn't been enough time for me to care about Moana. For the public to care about Moana. And I think Disney has well and truly jumped the shark with this. Both of these films are going to be terrible, but Moana's going to be worse, I think. And so yeah, with all that being said, nothing really much else to say, and so that's the end of the video. And I would like to remind you that these were just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think about the Moana and Lilo and Stitch remake news? Think it's going to be a resounding success or an overwhelming flop? I'm really curious for what you think, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.